On the 19th of June, 1912, a cold, eerie silence hung over Blacklow Hill in Warwickshire. The stillness was suddenly shattered by the sharp whistle of an axe slicing through the heavy air. With a single, precise strike, the blade severed the head of a kneeling man, sending it crashing onto the ground. Blood pooled on the lush English grass as the executioners stepped back silently, their grim task complete. This was the final chapter in the tragic story of Piers Gaveston, a man who had risen from obscurity to become the closest companion of the future King Edward II, only to fall spectacularly amid whispers of scandal and betrayal. But who exactly was this mysterious figure who captured a prince's heart and ignited the fury of an entire nation? How did a young knight from Gascony manage to dominate the mind of one of Europe's most powerful monarchs? And why was his death deemed necessary to save a kingdom teetering on the edge of collapse? To uncover this story of friendship, ambition, and political intrigue, we must journey back to the grand courts of medieval England. A time of glittering palaces, ruthless power struggles, and shifting loyalties. Edward, Prince of Wales, was unlike any heir to the throne England had ever seen. Tall, fair-haired, and physically imposing, he appeared every bit the warrior king in waiting. Yet beneath this outward strength beat a heart drawn more to poetry, music, and beauty than to the clangor of battle. While his father, King Edward I, was known as the Hammer of the Scots for his brutal military campaigns, the young prince sought solace not on the battlefield, but in the company of artists and musicians. Among these companions, one man stood above the rest: Piers Gaveston, a striking and charismatic knight from Gascony. Though born the son of a minor knight in a distant province under English control, Gaveston possessed a keen mind, sharp wit, and a charm so powerful it captivated the prince utterly. Their friendship blossomed quickly and intensely. Together, Edward and Gaveston shared countless adventures. They hunted in the royal forests, jousted at tournaments, and spent long nights discussing poetry, music, and dreams. Their bond was intimate and exclusive, provoking scandal among the English nobility, who expected their princes to be fierce warriors and wary of the favoritism shown to this foreigner. Edward's attachment to Gaveston went beyond companionship. It broke centuries of royal tradition. The prince ignored the advice of his counselors, elevating Gaveston with lands, titles, and wealth beyond his station. This blatant favoritism enraged the English aristocracy, who saw Gaveston as an outsider unworthy of such privileges. King Edward I, a ruler known for his iron will and stern discipline, viewed the relationship with growing alarm. In 1307, desperate to restore order and protect the dignity of the crown, he took the dramatic step of exiling Piers Gaveston from England. The young prince was heartbroken and begged his father on bended knee for mercy and the return of his cherished friend. Yet the king was unmoved. Gaveston departed, leaving behind a devastated Edward and a court that temporarily regained its fragile calm. But the exile was only the beginning of the storm. Political factions within the kingdom, emboldened by the king's decision, saw an opportunity to assert their own power. When Edward II ascended the throne after his father's death, he wasted no time recalling Gaveston, restoring his lands and titles. This reignited old resentments among the nobles, who saw the favorite's return as a threat to their influence. Gaveston's arrogance and blatant disregard for court etiquette only deepened their hatred. Tensions soon escalated into open rebellion. The barons, led by powerful lords, demanded Gaveston's removal and sought to curb the king's authority. In a dramatic showdown, Gaveston was captured, imprisoned, and ultimately executed, a violent act meant to send a message to the monarch himself. His death marked a turning point in Edward II's reign. The loss of his closest friend left the king isolated, vulnerable, and at the mercy of a fractious nobility. The kingdom descended into chaos, torn between loyalty and rebellion, personal grief and political ambition. Piers Gaveston's story is one of passion and power, loyalty and betrayal. It is a tale that reveals the precarious balance between friendship and politics and the devastating consequences when that balance is shattered. When Edward II ascended to the throne in 1907, the echoes of his father's reign still resonated across England, a land bruised by war and ruled with an iron fist. Yet, in the midst of this turmoil, Edward made a decision that shocked the realm. he summoned back Piers Gaveston, his exiled favorite, restoring him not only to favor, but elevating him above the highest nobility. For Edward, Gaveston was not merely a companion. He was a confidant, a source of comfort and strength in a lonely world. The king's attachment ran deep, almost to the point of obsession. To the nobles and courtiers, however, this was an intolerable affront. Gaveston, a man of relatively low birth and foreign origin, was lavished with riches and power that seemed undeserved and dangerous. The court quickly became a battleground of whispered resentments and open hostility. Gaveston's flamboyant manners, his disregard for traditional court etiquette, and his boldness in mocking his enemies only deepened the divide. He was seen as arrogant, insolent, and manipulative, a puppet master pulling strings behind the king's back. When Edward bestowed upon Gaveston the prestigious title of Earl of Cornwall, the outrage reached its peak. This unprecedented elevation was not just a personal favor. It was a direct challenge to the established aristocracy. The barons felt their power slipping away, replaced by the influence of a man they considered an outsider and upstart. Factions formed swiftly. On one side stood the king and his devoted favorite. On the other, the discontented nobles united in their determination to curb the influence of Gaveston and, by extension, Edward himself. The fragile peace of the court shattered as intrigue, envy, and fear fermented into open rebellion. The tension became unbearable. Meetings behind closed doors turned to plotting and conspiracy. Gaveston's enemies sought to isolate him, to undermine his standing with the king, and ultimately, to remove him by force if necessary. In 1311, a group of powerful barons presented the ordinances of 1311, a set of harsh demands aimed at limiting royal authority and specifically targeting Gaveston. The king was forced to agree, at least on paper, to exile his favorite once more. But Edward's loyalty to Gaveston remained unshaken, and the two continued to maintain a secret correspondence, fueling rumors and defiance. The situation escalated dramatically. In 1312, Gaveston was captured by rebellious nobles, imprisoned at Warwick Castle. Despite Edward's desperate attempts to secure his release, the barons stood firm. Tensions boiled over, and a grim verdict was delivered. Piers Gaveston was to be executed. On that fateful day in June, as the axe fell upon Blacklow Hill, the kingdom held its breath. It was not merely the death of a man, but a violent rupture in the fabric of royal loyalty and national stability. Edward II's grief was profound. The loss of his closest friend and confidant left him isolated and vulnerable. His reign, already fragile, unraveled further as noble factions seized the opportunity to challenge his rule. The king's inability to govern effectively in the aftermath led to years of unrest, rebellion, and personal tragedy. The story of Edward and Gaveston is more than a historical footnote. It is a timeless narrative of friendship, power, and the devastating consequences when love and politics collide. It reminds us that behind the grand tales of kings and battles lie deeply human stories, of loyalty tested, of hearts broken, and of the harsh realities that govern the corridors of power. The tragic tale of Edward II and Piers Gaveston echoes through history as a powerful reminder of the complexities of love, loyalty, and power. Their friendship, one that defied societal norms and royal protocol, ultimately became the catalyst for political upheaval and personal ruin. Edward's unwavering devotion to Gaveston, in the face of relentless opposition, exposed the delicate balance between a king's private desires and his public duties. In prioritizing friendship over the counsel of his nobles, Edward risked everything: his throne, his kingdom, and ultimately his legacy. Piers Gaveston, a man of humble origins, rose to heights few could imagine. Not through birthright or military conquest, but through the strength of a bond that transcended convention. His charm and intellect captivated a king, but also ignited fierce resentment among those who felt threatened by his influence. The consequences of their alliance were far-reaching. Gaveston's death, brutal and public, was intended to restore order, but instead plunged England into deeper chaos. Edward's reign grew increasingly unstable, marked by rebellion and tragedy, culminating in his own downfall. Yet, beyond the politics and power struggles lies a story of profound humanity. Two men whose connection challenged the rigid structures of their time. Their lives remind us that history is shaped not only by wars and treaties, but by the intimate relationships that define us. For modern audiences, the story invites reflection on the costs of loyalty and the courage it takes to stand by those we love, even when the world turns against us. It questions the price of ambition and the dangers of allowing personal passions to override public responsibility. Edward II and Piers Gaveston's story is a timeless narrative, a poignant lesson about the fragile intersection of heart and power, and the enduring impact of friendship that defies all odds. As you ponder their story, ask yourself, what would you sacrifice for loyalty? And how far would you go to protect the ones you cherish? Their tale, though centuries old, still resonates today, a testament to the enduring power of human connection in the face of adversity.